There is one rule of war that everyone believed in for decades. At night, you cannot be seen. During the day, an aircraft can be spotted by observers, searchlights, and fighters. But at night, war turns into chaos, where sound exists but precise direction does not, where flashes are visible but distance, altitude, and course remain a mystery. That is why night was considered a refuge. At night, armies hid and regrouped. At night, ships escaped pursuit. At night, bombers felt safe because in the darkness the enemy was blind, and every attack became a matter of guesswork. The German High Command believed in this rule without question. In 1940, the Luftwaffe considered the night its natural ally. By day, flight meant risk and losses. By night, flight meant control, confidence, and near total impunity. You climb to an altitude of 4,000 meters. Below you is the black emptiness of England, with no lights and no landmarks. There is no horizon line, no cities, only darkness beneath the wings. Inside the cockpit is the steady hum of engines, the vibration of metal, and the calm, confident signal in your headphones. That signal says one thing. You are on course. You are safe. You cannot be seen. That is how it had always been, and exactly how it seemed it was supposed to be. But then, something strange happens. Below, searchlights suddenly ignite and converge with unsettling precision, as if they were waiting for you. Anti-aircraft fire opens immediately, with outranging shots, as if the crews already knew where you would appear. And then, in the darkness, night fighters emerge, moving to intercept as though your route had been known in advance. This does not fit the familiar logic of war. The Germans did not understand what was happening and refused to believe the reports from their crews, because if it was true, it meant that someone had learned how to see in the dark. And if the night no longer concealed them, then the night no longer belonged to them. And it was in 1940 that one man first realized that this rule of war was a lie. Reginald Victor Jones is 30 years old. He is not a pilot and not a gunner. He has never sat in the cockpit of a bomber and never seen a target through a gun sight. He is a physicist, a man of calculations and patterns, accustomed to trusting numbers more than intuition. His work has always been connected to things that cannot be seen with the eyes, but that obey strict and unforgiving laws. Before the war, his life unfolded in Oxford among lectures, laboratories, and scientific experiments. He studied radio waves and the propagation of signals, phenomena that pass through space without leaving a trace. Now this experience brings him into a dimly lit office of British scientific intelligence, where reports of new raids and destruction arrive every night. Britain is burning. London is struck again and again. Coventry is almost destroyed. Birmingham is bombed night after night. These attacks do not look chaotic or random. Strikes are directed at industrial facilities, power stations, docks, and transport hubs, and the precision of these hits does not match traditional ideas of night warfare. You read the reports and gradually begin to notice repetition. The timing of the raids coincides with frightening regularity. The routes of the bombers repeat as if they are following paths laid out in advance. Targets are selected without error, as if someone is pointing them out in the darkness where there are no lights and no visual landmarks. This does not look like luck and cannot be explained by crew skill alone. Even the most experienced pilots cannot repeatedly find a target at night without mistakes. Everything points to the fact that the aircraft are not searching for the target, but are being guided to it deliberately and systematically. In 1940, the very idea of strategic radio navigation seems almost impossible. Radio is used for communication and for transmitting orders, but not for precisely guiding hundreds of aircraft deep into enemy territory. Even within the British command, many consider such assumptions to be fantasy. But Jones cannot ignore the facts. He compares the data from the raids with the testimonies of captured German pilots and hears strange details. They speak not about searching for a target, but about following a calm and steady signal that leads them through the darkness and disappears at the moment the bombs are released. He analyzes radio interference and notices repeating frequencies that appear precisely during the raids. He measures the intervals between signals and understands that this is not random noise. It is structure. Someone is drawing invisible lines in the night sky along which the bombers fly. If Jones is right, then the Luftwaffe is not simply using the night as cover. It has learned to navigate in darkness better than any army before it. This means that the familiar understanding of night warfare no longer works. But if he is wrong, Britain will continue to burn every night, losing factories, infrastructure, and people. The problem is that Jones has no direct proof. He has no captured equipment, no documents, and no confessions. There are only numbers, repeating patterns, and an increasingly clear sense that the enemy is looking through the night as confidently as in daylight. And if he wants to stop this, he will have to do the impossible. He must understand exactly how the Germans navigate in the dark and learn how to blind them without revealing himself. There is almost no time left for doubt. You are standing at a board in a cramped room that smells of chalk and heated lamps. Chalk in your hand, formulas and diagrams in front of your eyes. Frequencies, ranges, angles of intersection. This is not a battlefield and not the cockpit of an aircraft. But it is here that the outcome of the night war is being decided. The system that Jones is trying to unravel is called Knickebein. It is simple and frighteningly effective. 2 radio beams are transmitted from different stations and intersect at a single point. As long as the pilot hears a steady, continuous signal in his headphones, he is exactly on course. The moment the signal changes, it means the aircraft has reached the target and the bombs can be released. For German crews, this is an almost perfect system. There is no need to see the target. There is no need to navigate by lights or rivers. All that is required is to follow the signal that leads through the darkness like an invisible road in the sky. Simple, reliable, and, as the German command believes, completely invulnerable. The Germans are confident that no one knows the operating frequencies. They are confident that the principle of operation cannot be understood from the outside. They are confident that even if the enemy suspects the existence of the system, it is impossible to interfere with it without direct access to the equipment. That is why Jones makes a move that seems insane. He does not try to destroy the system and does not look for a way to physically disable it. He decides to do something far more dangerous. He decides to deceive it. British transmitters begin emitting signals on the same frequencies as the German beams. At first cautiously, almost imperceptibly, weak impulses that only slightly distort the signal. Then with increasing confidence and precision as the calculations are confirmed. The first night of testing arrives. You are a German pilot. Altitude is about 4,000 meters. Speed is roughly 350 kilometers per hour. In your headphones is the familiar steady tone, calm and reassuring. Everything is going according to plan, just as it has dozens of times before. The aircraft flies through darkness where there are no landmarks and no threats, only the signal you trust. And suddenly, you feel that something about the signal is not right. It changes almost imperceptibly. You correct your course, and for a moment, everything seems normal again. Then the signal begins to drift once more, as if someone is pulling an invisible line to the side. You blame it on interference, on weather, on faulty equipment, and you continue the flight. When the moment comes to release the bombs, you press the button, confident that you are over the target. Below there are no lights, no factories, no city, only fields, forests, and darkness. This is how a catastrophe begins, one that the German command has not yet realized. The first reports return at dawn. Crews complain about strange malfunctions, but no one speaks of catastrophe out loud. The bombs were released, the aircraft returned, and the equipment is formally intact. German officers blame the misses on weather, fog, and human error. Night warfare has always been imprecise, and a few mistakes do not cause alarm. But Jones sees something different. He compares the data from the first night with his calculations and realizes that the interference worked. The radio beams were distorted just enough to push the aircraft off course without arousing suspicion. This means the system can not only be jammed, but directed. He orders the operation to continue. British transmitters increase the signal. The interference now becomes bolder and more precise. The beams are shifted by kilometers and sometimes by tens of kilometers away from the real target. German bombers remain confident that they are on the correct course because their instruments confirm it. Over the following nights, the consequences become obvious. More and more bombs fall outside the cities. Factories remain intact. Reports of hits become contradictory. In some cases, crews are convinced the target was destroyed, but reconnaissance the next day finds no trace of damage. At Luftwaffe headquarters, irritation turns into suspicion. Commanders begin interrogating crews, checking instruments, and searching for errors in training. But the Knickebein system is considered reliable, and the very idea that the enemy has interfered with radio navigation seems unbelievable. Jones understands that he has a window of opportunity. While the Germans have not yet realized what is happening, he can go further. He introduces a new element: false radio beacons, which the British call Meacon. These transmitters do not merely distort the signal, they create a convincing illusion of a target where none has ever existed. Now German bombers do not simply miss. They fly precisely to false points where there are no factories, no cities, and no infrastructure. Bombs fall into emptiness, and crews return, convinced that the mission was accomplished. With each night, the effect grows stronger. Fuel losses increase, wear on aircraft grows, and the results of the raids become increasingly questionable. German crews feel that something is wrong, but they cannot explain it in words. They see the same thing every time. The instruments say everything is fine, while reality stubbornly refuses to match expectations. For Jones, this is the moment of truth. He understands that for the first time in the history of war, the enemy is losing its advantage not because of fighter fire and not because of anti-aircraft guns. It is losing it because it can no longer trust its own eyes and instruments in the dark. And the Germans still do not realize that this is only the beginning. The German command cannot ignore what is happening indefinitely. The statistics become too alarming. The number of sorties remains the same, fuel and ammunition consumption increases, and the real effect of the raids declines. Cities no longer burn as they once did, and reconnaissance reports intact factories that were supposed to have been destroyed. At Luftwaffe headquarters, they begin searching for an explanation. First, they blame the crews. Pilots are interrogated, their training and discipline are examined. Then suspicion falls on the technicians. Instruments are removed from aircraft, tested, calibrated, and installed again. Everything works correctly. The Knickebein system behaves exactly as designed. That is what is most frightening. Meanwhile, Jones understands that the game is entering a new phase. The Germans are too intelligent to ignore failure for long. The only question is what they will do next. The answer arrives sooner than expected. The Germans introduce a new navigation system. It is called X-Geraet. It is more complex, more precise, and more dangerous. Radio signals are now transmitted in pulses, and the moment of bomb release is determined not by the pilot, but by a timing counter. Making a mistake is almost impossible, at least according to its designers. For Jones, this is the moment when any error could cost Britain far too much. He understands that the previous methods will no longer work. Simple signal distortion is no longer enough. He must understand the very logic of how the new system operates. He and his team intercept the pulses and begin measuring the delays between them. Hours, seconds, fractions of a second. They compare the signals with the routes of the raids and gradually begin to see a pattern. The system is precise, but it still depends on time, and time can be deceived. British transmitters begin interfering at the most critical moment. The pulses are shifted. The counter is thrown off. To the pilot, Everything looks perfect. The instruments show that the aircraft is exactly over the target, but the bombs fall too early or too late. As a result, the strikes once again go into emptiness. Sometimes they land several kilometers from the target, sometimes in open fields, sometimes in the sea. German crews return with a growing sense of anxiety. They did everything correctly. They followed the instructions. But once again, the result does not match expectations. British night fighters receive increasingly accurate data. Searchlights switch on at exactly the right moment. Anti-aircraft fire no longer shoots blindly. Now it waits. And when a bomber appears at the calculated point, the sky suddenly comes alive. You fly through the darkness and understand for the first time that you are not simply spotted. You were expected. For German crews, the night stops being an ally. It becomes a source of doubt, fear, and constant tension. And for Jones, it becomes clear that the war in the dark has begun to turn in a different direction. And this is still not the limit. By the end of 1941, the German command understands that the problem is systemic. These are no longer isolated mistakes or a few bad nights. The effectiveness of night raids is declining, while losses are increasing. Most disturbing of all is the fact that crews continue to report perfectly executed missions, while the results on the ground do not match those reports. The response is the final and most ambitious attempt to regain control of the night. The Germans introduced the Y-Geraet system. Unlike previous systems, it is controlled from the ground in real time. A controller guides the aircraft by radio signal and gives the command to release the bombs at the correct moment. In theory, this makes interference impossible. The pilot no longer makes decisions. He simply follows instructions. For Jones, this is the most dangerous moment of the entire operation. If Y-Geraet works as intended, night bombing will once again become lethally precise. He understands that there is no time left for caution. The decision he makes is risky to the extreme. He orders that the signals not be jammed and not be hidden. He orders them to be distorted in such a way that the German controller sees a perfect flight, while the real aircraft drifts off course. This requires surgical precision and flawless calculation. British operators interfere with the link between the ground and the aircraft. Commands are slightly delayed. Instructions are shifted by seconds and sometimes by fractions of a second. To the system, this does not look like an error. To the controller, everything appears to be going according to plan. To the pilot, the instruments confirm that the course is correct, but in reality, the aircraft slowly drifts away. Sometimes it flies directly into the zone of British air defense. Sometimes it ends up over empty countryside. Sometimes over the sea. The bombs are released exactly on command, but the target is nowhere near where it was expected to be. There is a night when out of nearly 200 German bombers, fewer than 40 actually find their target. The rest return with empty bomb bays or do not return at all. For the Luftwaffe, this is a blow that can no longer be concealed. Panic begins at headquarters. Generals accuse the crews of unprofessionalism. Crews accuse the technicians. Technicians inspect the equipment and find no faults. No one can explain why a system that works perfectly on paper leads to failure after failure in reality. For German pilots, the night finally stops being safe. Every sortie is accompanied by the feeling that someone is watching you from the darkness, guiding you and waiting for a mistake. And for Jones, it becomes clear that he has accomplished the most important thing. He has stripped the enemy of confidence. The night no longer belongs to the Luftwaffe. By the beginning of 1942, the consequences become impossible to ignore. German reports no longer align with one another. On paper, the raids appear successful, but aerial reconnaissance and intercepted communications reveal a different picture. Targets that were supposed to be destroyed continue to operate. Production does not stop. Infrastructure is restored faster than expected. German crews return with growing tension. They no longer trust the night. Instruments show one thing, reality proves another. Every sortie is accompanied by doubt, and every deviation in the signal is perceived as a threat. Pilots begin to question where they actually are, even when the equipment insists that everything is fine. At Luftwaffe headquarters, confusion reigns. All systems have been checked, all calculations confirmed, all instructions followed. Yet the results stubbornly fail to match expectations. No one can openly state that the enemy has learned to interfere with navigation, because that would mean admitting the impossible. For Jones, this is the moment when it becomes clear that the experiment has turned into a weapon. He and his team are no longer merely reacting to German innovations. They are staying ahead of them. Every new signal is analyzed. Every attempt to regain control of the night is met with a prepared response. British air defense now operates with confidence. Night fighters receive precise directions. Searchlights switch on at exactly the moment an aircraft enters the correct sector. Anti-aircraft fire no longer blankets wide areas, but strikes pre-calculated points. For German crews, the sky becomes a trap. You climb into the night, knowing that safe routes no longer exist. Any signal can be false. Any command can lead you to destruction. The night that once concealed now betrays. It is at this moment that the German command begins to understand the central truth. The problem is not the pilots, not the technology, and not the weather. The problem is that the enemy has learned to interfere with the very logic of night warfare, turning it against those who believe themselves masters of the darkness. If you find these forgotten details of war, hidden technologies, and stories of people who changed history without firing a single shot interesting, we would be grateful if you subscribed to the channel. These stories deserve to be remembered and passed on. By the end of this phase of the war, the Luftwaffe loses more than accuracy. It loses confidence. Every night sortie is now perceived as a step into the unknown, where the enemy sees more than it seems. And for Jones, it becomes obvious that he has achieved the impossible. He has taken away the enemy's most valuable weapon of night warfare, the belief that the darkness belongs to them. The impossible action ends here, but its consequences are only beginning to unfold. What the German command did not understand at first only became clear with time. They were not simply being fought at night. Their signals were being read, their actions anticipated, and the very structure of their navigation was being interfered with. This was not a tactical trick and not a temporary ruse. It was the emergence of an entirely new way of waging war. Electronic warfare becomes a new front, without trenches, without tanks, and without a line of contact. On this front, territory is not seized and kilometers are not counted. Victory belongs to the side that understands the signal better, analyzes data faster, and intervenes in the enemy system more precisely. The effect of this struggle cannot be seen immediately, but it proves decisive. For the Luftwaffe, the consequences are devastating. Night bombing loses its former meaning. Aircraft still take to the air, but they no longer deliver the expected results. Every operation requires more resources, fuel and personnel, while the return becomes smaller and smaller. Germany is forced to divert forces to defense, strengthen air defense, and rebuild its entire strategy. Britain, which only recently stood on the edge of survival, gains breathing space. Factories continue to operate. Infrastructure is restored. Weapons production increases. The night that was meant to break the country ceases to be a deadly threat. This is not a victory in a single battle, but a turning point in the very logic of the war. German commanders begin to understand that they are facing more than a technical problem. They are facing an enemy who has turned science and industry into weapons. Where courage of the crew and accuracy of navigation once decided outcomes, now the decisive factor is the ability of a system to function under pressure and withstand interference. The work of Jones and his team goes far beyond a single campaign. The principles they established become the foundation of an entire direction in military thinking. Signal interception, data distortion, false targets, and information control turn into standard tools of warfare. These technologies do not disappear with the end of the Second World War. They carry over into the Cold War era, into early warning systems, into the confrontation of missile complexes and satellites. The invisible struggle of signals becomes an integral part of any major conflict. For Germany, the ripple effect is irreversible. The loss of night superiority means the loss of initiative. The war begins to be fought by someone else's rules, where every new decision comes too late and every step is calculated by the opponent in advance. This is not an instant defeat, but a slow, systemic exhaustion, and this is the main outcome. Not a single operation and not a single navigation system changed the course of the war, but the realization that the future of conflict is decided not only on the battlefield, but also in the airwaves, where victory belongs to those who can see the invisible. Reginald Victor Jones will survive the war. He will not become the face of propaganda posters, and he will not be a hero of parades. His name will not be chanted in public squares, and millions will not remember it. But it is precisely because of his calculations and decisions that thousands of people will remain alive, and an entire country will be able to endure the darkest period of its history. After the war, he will continue his scientific work. He will write, analyze, and teach a new generation of specialists. His contribution will remain in the shadows for a long time because a war fought in the airwaves rarely looks spectacular. Yet it was this war that defined what the future of conflict would become. Today, in the age of drones, satellites, and radio intelligence, his work is more relevant than ever. Modern armies no longer rely only on eyesight and weapons. They rely on signals, data, and control of information. War in the darkness no longer exists because darkness no longer hides. It is simply another range that can be studied, read, and used. The story of Jones is a reminder that the course of war is not changed only by soldiers on the front line. It is changed by engineers, analysts, and scientists who find ways to strip the enemy of confidence and turn strengths into weaknesses. Sometimes, the most dangerous blow is delivered not by an explosion, but by a precise calculation. If this story felt important and interesting to you, support us with a like. Every such signal shows that stories like this deserve to be told and remembered. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss new episodes about hidden technologies, forgotten people, and unexpected turns in military history. Write in the comments where you are watching this episode from and whether military service was part of your family history. It matters to us to preserve these memories together with you. Thank you for helping ensure that these people and these events do not disappear into silence. They deserve to be remembered.